Once again, I'm Sydney, and I am a servant of the Almighty God. I am also the author of From Whence Cometh Intelligence, From Whence Cometh Intelligence, Humanity's Inflection Point. And these are some additional covenants that I received years ago that I follow. Our science reveals God's methods. The key to meeting God's expectation of us is self-control, and diversity is His. As servants, we must honor His diversity. In this version of the Recognizing God's Omnipotence podcast, I want to focus on what I'll call the missing piece of the theory of evolution. You know how in the past you used to talk about the missing link? Well, this is the missing piece of the theory of evolution. So let me clarify from the start. I believe in science. Evolution is fact. Okay? But the missing piece is this. It's over the last 200 years since Sir Charles Darwin published on the origin of species in 1859, we've done a very good job. Because I try to talk to people about, there's something is not quite right with it. So the piece is missing, right? And this is where the inspiration that is the foundation of From Whence Cometh Intelligence. Because it's like saying after, we just have let's say we have the elements in the periodic table, and give them 20 billion, give it 1 trillion years, those minerals somehow decided to get together and build something. So you have, for instance, you have iron. Well, it just oxidizes, so now it has to to make a more durable form of iron, we're going to make steel, we're going to make stainless steel. This is the iron deciding this, right? Then it decides, I need to get together with somebody else and combine. Or the forces just push them together and they combine. Just the fact that they coexist. And out of that, over 10 billion, 50 billion, 1 trillion years, one day we wake up and there's a car sitting out there. Yep, a car. Or a plane, but let's take the car. And when we look inside, we realize, this thing, not only did these metals come together, they actually progress to the point where they do welding. They actually progress to the point where they say, we have, this car is supposed to move, there's going to be friction, we got to create these lubricants, right? Because otherwise, metal on metal, it's going to wear itself out. Friction is going to overheat and weld itself back together. So, all of these things, even the rubber in the tires, right? Somehow, it's like, we need rubber in the tires. So we're going to get the right compound. All of this stuff happening. The point, it sounds kind of ludicrous, but the point I'm making is this. Even if we look in our archaeological record, what we don't see is this random process that produces all these wonderful forms of life. We don't see in our archaeological record mistakes, random creations. We don't see that animal that had, you see like a mammal with, 10 legs. No. What you see is, as we go along, we see all the branching, we see all the stuff. But the point I'm getting to, it is logical. We do not see illogical artifacts in our archaeological record. We don't see it. And very often, when we first encounter something, it may look that way, but then we realize, no, there is purpose. And when we see purpose, we see intelligence in everything. Like the first time for instance, we encountered a kangaroo, we'd be like, I thought all things had all the mammals and they would have 4 legs and they run. But we see these different things. We see a rhinoceros with a horn in the middle. We see, but everything is purposeful. The fact that we can observe that logic and we don't see just random stuff that don't function. And yes, of course, they would die off, but the record would be there. We would find the structures that says, oh, well, this didn't make sense, and that's why it came up as some mutation that was totally random, didn't make sense, exists for a while, and then here it is in the record. We don't see that. What we see is a logical progression. There were challenges, and so with that, we have to understand there is intelligence. This is something that when we go in the record, we cannot see intelligence. We can see the physical form, just like we encounter someone. We can have a conversation. We see their physical form. We cannot measure. There is no way that currently that we can measure or have some indication of the intelligence that's contained within that, or the intelligence that built it. When we get a car, let's go by that car. It just sits there. Now we can embed intelligence in that car. We can build intelligence, that artificial intelligence, so that it can respond to us. We can get on the phone and say, hey, I want you to pick me up, drop me off. Well, we're getting there. But this is the sort of thing. So the intelligence, right? Even before we get that car, something has to be purposeful. It has to be purposeful. So when we look at every creature, we see it has, a centipede, a millipede, all these legs coordinated. Yes, there's a purpose. And that's what we can see in any of our, the historical records. But every creature that we see, there is purpose. Even the relationship between plants and animals, again, there is purpose. And so I understand we are logical creatures, and we just accept it. Yeah, but now that we are building intelligence, we realize that the entire theory of evolution is missing the fact that there is purpose, there is logic, there is intelligence in every creature and in the design of every creature. That's correct. In the design of every creature. So what we see is, as a mutation comes about, there is a purpose. It's not just, just because, well, let's just try this. No, there is something. And if you get into from whence cometh intelligence, you will see, I try to address that. You see intelligence, and so just like we would see a car outside, we would realize, oh, yeah, 3 wheels, 2 wheels, whatever, there is a purpose. So you see the intelligence in it. We see this in every living thing. I go into a lot of that when you talk about intelligence, there are 4 critical components, right? I say sometimes 3, sometimes 4, but because one of it is memory, right? You need memory. Because memory is where, for instance, if you want to compare something, you have to have memory of what it should, or the previous version look like, to what you're seeing now, right? You have to have memory. You have to be able to process that. That comparing something, that's processing. You need some kind of processor to take that information and compare it, right? So you need processors. You also need that transmission ability to transmit the information from with the process to the processor, and then if the processor says I want to do something with it, it has to send that information. You need that, and you need sensors, and sensors are special, right? And again, the theory of evolution just ignored all of that. And I understand, in 1859, we weren't building intelligence. We weren't aware of it being like a separate attribute that is part of every creature. And so when we talk, let me give you a simple example of sensors. Phototropism, right? That's when plants, they turn towards light, because photosynthesis, the plants are turning. So what is required there? You put a plant and the leaf facing this way, the light is that way. The plant must have sensors, light sensors. And those light sensors says, hey, the light is over here. So now that information from the sensor. Now, when you think about sensors alone gives you must have intelligence, because the sensor that detects light is not detecting sound, it's not doing vibration, it's not detecting moisture. So that whatever design that sensor must understand light. When we hear things, our ears, we have those sensors, that's not detecting light, it's not detecting heat, it's not detecting water, it's detecting sound. So whatever design sound sensors must understand sound. You look at a plant, it needs moisture, it needs water, it has moisture detectors. I remember one time in my lawn, I don't know if it was myself, the gardener, whomever, put a crack in one of these underground pipes for the sprinkler. This tree found it, and he put his root right in there because there was water in there. The tree has moisture sensors, and it knows it needs that moisture. See? So whomever or whatever designed that moisture sensor must understand what moisture is like, what water is like. So you can build a sensor so that it says, oh, I need that, go towards it. Just like the plant turning towards light, it has to have light sensors. So, and whomever designs sensor, regardless of what sensor, like we do in GPS sensors, and we know the sensor itself has to have processors in it, right? It has to do that processing, and then it can send it to, and so any living thing has a series of sensors. The evolutionary record doesn't address that because, again, we didn't do intelligence in 1859. This is a recent thing. And it needed someone who recognizes this to see that this is completely missing from our theory of evolution. Because that having sensors, designing the mechanisms so that that would cause a mutation, right? Because it has to sense something and realize, oh, I need to change. Again, you see, all of this is logic, requires intelligence to detect that something is out of balance. And I've tried to pick up a copy of From Whence Cometh Intelligence. I try to address that. Every creature, because of the sensors that they have, recognizes, let's call it stressful situations. And now, if we could design ourselves, right? I mean, I would love to have cat eyes. I can see during the day, and us, that whole fear we have of the dark, we wouldn't have that. We can just see like the felines. We don't have that ability. And I don't believe that, it's like where the old robots, where you sit there, tweak this. No. We know now we can build intelligence. This is why when you hear, machine learning, we can build intelligence that adds to itself, that adjusts. It's also why we're kind of scared of messing with, living like enzymes and viruses and stuff, because we don't know, we don't have the full blueprint. Otherwise, for instance, instead of building night vision goggles, we would go tweak the DNA so that we start building that in the next generation. We start saying, okay, no, our eyes change, and so we start, see? But we don't have that. And so when you hear that this animal did this to itself, you have to stop and say, really? But they've done over the last 160, or less than the last 200 years since the theory of evolution, they've convinced us. You talk to anybody, nature did that. And you hear it all the time. That animal adjusted itself to, and you're like, listen, you'll hear it. This animal did this, but we can't do it. Personally, I would spend some time trying to change my DNA so that succeeding generations would have, those feline eyes. But you see distinct characteristics, right? That's the thing where it makes sense that there is a machine learning that adjusts and creates mutations and all of that stuff. But it's intelligent. It's intelligent. Else we would see all kinds of random creatures that don't make sense. Everything we see makes sense. So the missing part of the theory of evolution is the intelligence that is built into and embedded into every living thing. Okay, so I know this will take some time to be adopted, but I'm sure once anyone looks at it, and you look at our evolutionary record, you realize these are a series of logical things that are happening. There is a logic to it. And this is what has been missing. That will lead to the question I pose from whence cometh intelligence. Who or what designed the intelligence? Because before you had these even mutations occurring, you had to have that intelligence. And I'm not saying that something has a tweak, because we were there, tweak this, it's like you driving a car. No, it's not like that. Let the car. If you're smart enough, you can build a system that adjusts. And we see that even in nature, we see that, right? From plankton to the largest whales, right? Or the top predators in the ocean, we see that logic. And if given enough time, our science is only a few, I call it the modern science, right? The last 500, less than the last, since we got away in 1869 for the periodic table, 1859 evolution, the evolutionary theory, the beginnings, that took us away from magical stuff, show us the secrets, our science, revelations of God's methods, okay? So that is what the modern thing is about, and this is why we must adjust the theory of evolution to incorporate the fact that there has been intelligence. We see intelligence everywhere in the design. We recognize the intelligence that's built in. When we see sensors, just seeing a sensor, just recognizing that the plant has sensors had to be designed. We could not, again, have the memory, the processing, the transmission, and the sensors that makes a plant turn towards light or seek water, detect where the water is. And this is just a plant. You look at every animal, I say even you look at a unicellular animal like a paramecium, an amoeba, there is a decision process there. Because it has to know what to, again, I go pick up a copy of the book. It has to know what is food and what will feed on it. It has to know what it can eat. So if it otherwise, you can see an amoeba going and just looking for grains of sand and saying, well, I'm going to imbibe this, right? So there must be sensors that says, this is something that I can digest. We see this logic again, and because of the magical nature that they've kind of fed us. And so I remember talking to someone and saying, but all they're blinded. No, nature. And says, do you recognize it? Nature. And he said, who is nature? Can you tell me what is nature? It's just nature. And this is the same thing we had when the earth was flat. Or the earth was the center of the universe. And I understand, most people don't think about this, but we must have a solid foundation to our sciences. We cannot just, it's magic. We're going back to, that period when we can just turn, alchemy, we can just turn lead into gold, magically. But now that we understand, no, there is a nucleus, there are the atoms are constructed differently, with the protons and neutrons and electrons and the different forces that hold them in orbit, and all of these things, as we discover more and more, we realize, no, we move away from the magical, and we need to move away from the magical. Nature did it. We can recognize that there is intelligence from the unicellular all the way through, and this is both fauna and flora, plants and animals. We see the intelligence is directing the mutations. We see the intelligence in the overall system. So when we talk about this synergies between plants and animal and all of these things, we see that intelligence. And so right now they say, well, nature gave this hummingbird this long bill so that it can feed on this plant, get the nectar from that plant. And it also gave that plant, put those stamens or those things so that the pollen gets on the head of the bird, so that when it goes to another plant, it transfers it. Yeah. That is logical. And so we see it. But right now, science is still saying it's magical. Nature just did that. It put that right there, and it put the pollen, and it put the collar to attract the bird, so that when the bird goes in there to get some nectar, it puts it on its head. So it takes it to the next thing. You look at, dispersal of, plant seeds and all the different ways animals do it, and fertilization that we need for the very food that we eat. All of these things, we see these beautiful processes, and everyone can, I'm sure you can recognize, no, it makes sense that you would have this and this. So intelligence, it makes sense. It's intelligence. We see the logic. So I'm talking about the logic and that's why I stay away from talking about human beings, because we talk about what we learn as intelligence. No. Look in nature. Within us, when you talk about us, I talk about our immune system, our digestive system. Crazy things like, I heard this, that when you die, digestion stops. Really? So they used to give us the impression that digestion was just like a chemical thing. You had these enzymes, and they don't refer to them as like living things. It's like, no, these are just like, these are just something that like chemicals, right? And they act on things. But yet, when an organism dies, they stop. Okay. See, so, but that's great, because we are learning more. There's that whole thing with our immune system that was, in the blood, attacking stuff, the white corpuscles, but then they realized, no, now it's moving. It's like in your stomach, it's based on the biomes there and all this stuff. So we are learning. Less than 500 years, I consider our modern sciences. It is time that we recognize that throughout all of this, and the theory of evolution itself is missing the intelligence that we see. There is no accounting for that. We can't find, in our archaeological record, we can't find something that says this is the intelligence. Even within us, we don't know where or what human or plant memory looks like. We don't know what memory looks like. And I always like to say, if we did, just like we would, for instance, get a court order or have somebody say, it's okay, I'm going to tap into your memory. Can you imagine that? What you thought, what you felt, what you smelled, what you saw. We can tap into that and replay. Listen, let's go back 10 years and see what he saw, his memory. Let's go tap into somebody's memory. We're not there. I don't know if we'll ever get there. But that is one of the important components of intelligence, right? We remember someone from an uncontacted tribe wouldn't know what a car is. They'll run away. They're like, oh, that's a plane is a big bird, a metal bird. This is that's intelligence. It takes intelligence to build that. And when we look at our evolutionary record, we see intelligent mutations. Every mutation is in response to something. That alone requires intelligence. Okay? Otherwise, you just be going like, just things just randomly just spitting out all kinds of stuff for basically no good reason. But we see this, and this is why the theory of evolution now has to be modified to recognize intelligence, intelligence directing mutations, intelligence being modified. We see forms as they change, right? What I call that intrinsic intelligence changes, because the intrinsic intelligence in a tadpole is different from a frog. So we look at things that have metamorphosis, right? A caterpillar that goes into a butterfly, the intelligence there changes, because a caterpillar doesn't want to behave like a butterfly. He doesn't try to fly off. So that intelligence, right, is different. The intelligence in a caterpillar says, I'm eating this plant. A butterfly says, I'm getting nectar. That intelligence, and even, so you see how that changes. And this is the sort of thing that the theory of evolution never addressed. But we have to insist that we get away from the magical nature. Nature did it, and recognize, no, the intelligence is changing. And maybe in time, once we recognize that, the components that go into the development and design of intelligence, we may be able to address and discover those components, and maybe start to put some metrics and be able to, but as long as we just say it's magical, the nature did it, we will stay with this thing where it's like staying in the dark. The earth is the center of the universe. Okay, so again, we need to get away from that stuff, and we need when they come to us, and when we hear these things of like this animal, we hold on. Did the animal do it? How come we can't? Right? And again, that goes back to the intelligence. Anyhow, so I think this is something I'd like to wrap up, and I'll also refer to this podcast because it's very, very important. This is the heart of the big change that will come. It's recognizing from whence cometh intelligence. Right? When we recognize that, this will be it's a groundswell of information that affects everything we do. Okay? And because just as the theory of evolution, we recognize it as part of like the foundation for modern sciences, it's currently deficient. It's missing the intelligence, which is probably a half or more, because it directs everything we saw. Everything that Sir Charles Darwin observed was directed by this intelligence. The intelligence that's built in, not from it doesn't have to be external. It's built into this creature that says, I'm under stress, but not consciously, right? It's like we program the car. So the car by itself is not saying, well, but inside that car there is a process that says, look, something is happening here. I need to start modifying. And if the car can modify itself, right now it can just modify behavior. But if it could modify itself, it would say, okay, send that message to say, and I go into quite a bit of detail in From Whence Cometh Intelligence, to go into how that would happen, the interaction between sensors and generational stuff, but that can lead to mutation. But that would all be driven by intelligence, not external, but I show how with this intrinsic intelligence, and it's somewhat like machine learning that enables that. Okay, so I want to thank you for taking the time to view this and remind you it's not a coincidence. You consciously did things throughout that led you down this path. Let's share it. Pick up a copy of it, From Whence Cometh Intelligence, and see how that could lead to humanity's inflection point, where things get together and we build together. We build a much better world. Again, thank you for taking the time, and until, may God bless us all. Thanks again.